What's up, everybody? Welcome to another session of Live with WSO. It is March 15th at noon, or a little past noon now, Pacific. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I think right now we're streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, Insta. We may have to stream this a little later. Having some issues with Yellow Duck, but other than that, I think most of us should be here. So just similar format to last time. Ideally, just open it up for questions around interviews, careers, whatever you guys want to discuss. It can be, I know there's been some layoffs recently. You just saw in the forums. William Blair had some big cuts today. I heard upwards 10 to 30%, which sounds kind of crazy. I didn't know it was that big, but yeah, hearing a lot of stuff, a lot of rumblings. Obviously, it's been a very tumultuous last week with Silicon Valley Bank and the news there, and Signature as well in New York. So yeah, I think the markets have actually pretty stable considering, but yeah, we'd love to see how everyone's doing this week. This week's much better than last week. Last week I was really sick, so as was the whole family. So yeah, open it up to questions. Anybody on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook or Twitter. I think in StreamYard I can see comments coming in from LinkedIn. Hey Mohammed, how you doing? The man himself, Mohammed, cracked me up, man. How are things been? Hopefully well. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you see any comments coming in or any questions. Hey, Keel.
Yep.
Hey, so first question coming in here. Any advice for college seniors who are going through full-time recruiting for investment banking? So, Keel, my advice kind of depends on if your internship experience and if you had a junior internship and you actually didn't get a full-time offer, or what your situation is. Are you a college senior with no investment banking internship experience at all? So if you're in the situation where you want IB, but you just haven't been able to get the IB internship experience, I would highly recommend joining our finance research internship. Try to get some relevant experience on your resume that looks a little more interesting to IBs, and or try to do like a spring internship or any sort of internship for post-graduation. It's going to be tough to get a full-time seat right now at any reputable bank, simply because it's so late. If it's your senior year. So I would just say, just to try and get any sort of internship first to bridge towards that full-time role. And then in terms of like, if you are really gung-ho on getting it, even without the experience, I think you really have to look downstream, regional tiny boutiques, 2 to 4 person shops, really spread your net wide and far. And that's where LinkedIn comes in. That's where the networking comes in. And that's where like just getting on the phone with as many people as humanly possible over the next few months is going to probably yield you the best results and increase your odds the most, versus like drilling. Yes, drilling on the technical interview questions is great. The behavioral, making sure those are all polished, is great too. But getting on the phone with people and expressing an interest and showing that you have the skill set and you understand what the job actually is going to be like step 1, 2, and 3. So that's what I would suggest. It's a tough spot to be. Like if you're a senior and you don't have a full-time offer, remember, like IB recruiting now is happening in sophomore year, junior, or even early sophomore year now for a lot of these banks. So it's kind of an insane timeline. It's unfortunate because then people sometimes don't know what they want to do, or that they're even interested in investment banking until like junior year, or for some, like maybe yourself, senior year. So it's unfortunate, but that's just the reality of it. So it takes a lot of like additional work to get there. So Connor asks, Connor Walsh from 2 weeks ago, wondering if this summer's internship program is still open, and if you think it's worth it for me as a freshman to do it this summer. Hey, Connor. Yeah, I think, the summer internship program is open. I definitely think it's worth it to do as a freshman. I think it's a great internship to do as a freshman because it gets that kind of relevant experience. I still would always advise you to get an investment banking internship if you can, but that's pretty rare for freshmen summer, unless you're like super on top of it as like a high school senior and you like start networking right when you get on campus, which there are people like that, but it's few and far between. So I would say, yes, our finance research internship is a great kind of resume filler for freshman summer. I would, Amir, if you could just put the link to that in the chat, maybe so people can see it. I think it'll come across. So yeah, I would do that, Connor. And we're actually announcing something in a couple of weeks, which might even be a better fit for you, a little more intense program. That includes the internship, but it includes a lot of other stuff to kind of help prep you. And I think as a freshman and sophomore, it actually could be the kind of a perfect match for people who are really gung-ho on breaking in. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. I'll be making a big announcement probably in the weekly live, not next week, but the week after. So that'll be exciting. Let's see what else we got here. Hayden asked an interesting question. Do you think the current state of the economy will have a negative impact on summer analyst 23 getting returns? Absolutely, Hayden. I think it's going to be a pretty tough summer. I think I'd expect the return offer rates to be lower than what they've been in the last several years. What does that mean? That means maybe at a bank where there was 100% full-time offers, maybe it's looking more like 70%, and the places that are 60 to 80% historically, maybe it looks more like 40 to 50%. So obviously much more competitive, a little bit more nerve-wracking through the summer because, there are fewer seats. So it just means that the performance in that summer is even more magnified. So whereas like in a lot of banks, getting that summer internship is almost like a guaranteed full-time offer or as close to it as you can get. Now it's a little bit more like you have to scrap, you have to really understand what you're doing in terms of like when you hit the ground running, networking, making sure you're making good connections, making sure you're doing good work, and making sure you're just showing like a desire to be there, coming in early, staying late, that type of thing, and seeing if you can help in any way you can to take some load off the analysts. So yeah. Here we go. How are exit ops from Christian Larimer? How are exit ops if you do analyst years at a lower middle market? I assume lower middle market bank. Exit ops are going to be more like what you make of them because the recruiters won't be reaching out to you. You won't be getting into on-cycle PE recruiting unless you are super proactive. But there are a ton of lower middle market private equity funds that would love your skill set. So you can still make some great exit ops out of your analyst years at an IB at a lower middle market shop, especially if your deal experience is good. So the hard part at a lower middle market shop, sometimes the deal flow isn't as consistent. So that's where it can really hurt you if you're just pitching for like a year and then you only have like one deal on your resume. That's where it makes recruiting a little bit harder. So it really depends on the lower middle market shop, what the deal flow is like. Like you could be at a lower middle market shop, do 10 deals, have amazing experience, and then have a lot of great exit ops because you can speak to those and you're getting in front of, and you're a great networker. Maybe you're getting in front of the right recruiters early on and making yourself known. I think from the people I've spoken with at middle markets or the lower middle markets that aren't getting the natural looks, if you reach out to all the top private equity recruiters, you should be more kind of trying to get in front of them for those calls and for those interviews with them, just to express interest early on and let them know that you are very serious about it and that the buy side, is interesting to you, assuming that's what you want to do. Or for example, if you're like looking for hedge funds, like letting the recruiters know that are best placed into those roles, to let them know early on that's something that really interests you. You want to go public markets. You've always been interested in the market, blah, 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 making sure your pitches are really kind of tight. So that's what I would say. It's kind of like the exit ops are what you make of them from almost anywhere. A little bit's going to be out of your control in terms of deal flow. But other than that, I think it's going to be more about like how you come across and how polished you are and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be down on yourself. You just have to make your own. I think for the mega funds and upper middle market funds, your exit ops it's going to be very hard to get into those because just the processes are so limited and they're so early. like it's usually right after the analysts start as an investment banking. Like within 2 weeks of hitting the desk after training, they're already doing on-cycle recruiting. It's at least this past year, that's what happened. So it's kind of insane. Let me see what else we got going here in terms of questions. This is a funny one. How do I respond to a LinkedIn connection mistaking me for someone else they've met in person recently and reaching out to me to talk about synergies? Do I correct them and get on the phone? I would correct them. It'll be obvious that they didn't really understand who you were. So yeah, I would correct them and just let them know, oh, that I think maybe you're talking about another John or whatever your name is. Be like, but I'd still love to get on the phone for a quick chat. You probably get ghosted, but I think it's better than just like trying to get a phone call and getting on there and then being like, oh, who are you? Let's see, here we go. So Ghost is asking me from YouTube, hey, Patrick, thanks for doing these live streams. Hey, no problem. Really appreciate it. I wanted to ask, what do you think is the most adequate way and timeline for someone who's starting in tech consulting to private equity? Again, similar to like coming from a lower middle market, if you're in tech consulting, trying to get into PE, it's going to be a little bit more of an uphill battle, but there are private equity funds that are more consulting focused. So I would first off find those, and you can find those just doing some searches in the forums. But again, I'd try to make sure you are talking to the proper recruiters. Let me pull up here private equity recruiters. There's a bunch of threads on like who the top recruiters are for PE. We place Wall Street itself. We work with some funds to help find associates as well, but there's some fun in terms of upper middle market and mega funds. There are let me hear list of. Sorry, I'm having issues finding it because list. I think it was called like list of best private equity recruiters. It might be the title of the thread. I'm trying to find it for you guys to make sure I can. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can dig on that. There's a thread on there that has like a list of all the top private equity recruiters. You could probably search it through WSO and find it, but that thread is a good one to start out at in terms of where you should be emailing your resume. Also, another little tip for consultants to make your resume look a little more kind of standardized for private equity recruiting, I'd try to make your engagements look more like transactions. So you're talking more about like, and then focus a little bit more on like your analytical, the analytical Excel work rather than it being so much strategy and so much that stuff, because they're going to know you're already stronger on the strategy side and maybe a little bit weaker on the financial modeling side. So you want to kind of try and reduce that perspective. Hey, Grace. I'm a stay-at-home mom trying to return to financial service industry this year. Is there any program you have designed for moms with gaps? Any other advice? Hey, Grace. It's not. There's no specific program we have designed for moms with gaps in the resume, but we do have our interview courses, which I would suggest. They have a networking course within there, and that's helpful for anyone. Whether you're a mom trying to get back in the workforce or you're, a career transitioner, you're let's say you're in law and you're trying to get to finance. I think those skills are kind of universal, whether it's you're taking a big gap, changing industries, coming back after taking a break, after failed startup. Any of these situations, I think, is a great. I think having those networking skills and knowing how to properly reach out to people, how to find those commonalities, how to make connections with people and build real relationships is gonna actually probably be the best time spent, is working on those skills and getting really good at that and getting on the phone with people to express kind of what you're looking for next and let them know that you appreciate their advice, you like what they've done. Maybe you could find other mothers that have kind of come back into the industry, get some feedback from them, some mentorship from them, and let's see what else we got. What is opportunities, value, and ability to go in going into private wealth management and AM out of undergrad. What are the major differences with that and IB out of undergrad? Great question, Skykeeper. So I think it's important to know these are very different. Let me refresh my cam. I think I'm all blurry, but whatever. So private wealth management and AM, I think out of undergrad, it's going to be actually a little bit easier and less competitive, simply for the fact that like these are sales roles by and large very early on at undergrad. So I know one of our guys who helps WSO on like the daily PLR daily newsletter. He works at a bulge bracket in the private wealth management division right out of undergrad, and he feels like it's like slow, it's kind of boring, it's like a lot of like cold calling, it's a lot of, you know, you have to follow market and all that stuff, but it's going to be much more geared towards like relationship building and sales and actual like market oriented, like public markets oriented stuff, versus investment banking is going to be traditional advisory is going to be much more around like your skills on financial modeling, valuation, you know, comps and DCF and all that good stuff. And then working within a team to advise clients on like mergers and acquisitions, capital raises, equity capital raises, debt capital raises, restructuring if you're in the distressed group. So it's much more, it is different. Like one's like more talking to individuals about like, or with individuals maybe on the PWM side, or clients in asset management versus clients that are trying to make like strategic purchases or asset dispositions on the IB side. So I think, to be honest, I think the work is more interesting in IB. It's a much more intense job, and the pay is about pay reflects that, but you're working probably close to double the hours, if not more in some cases, and you're getting paid about double as well. So I can't believe that, DJ, that the guy, that's a really funny story, by the way. So yeah, that's what I'd say. It's a big difference. Like they're completely different roles. I think the exit ops at IB are much more attractive, not just for private equity, but for like corporate strategy, you know, senior manager at like an FP&A, like a startup for FP&A, or doing like financial strategy, that type of stuff. Yeah, here's the thread. 2022 private equity headhunter coverage. You can check that out in the PE forum for people looking for that list of like firms to try and get in front of. Jamal asks, what's the eligibility for joining the internship? We just have an application where you kind of do a short little writing snippet so we can get a sense of your writing skills. And that's basically it, along with some questions. But yeah, anyone can join. There's no requirement there. No like minimum age or anything like that. What are some possible career paths for individuals starting in equity research? Let me see here. Matthew. Yeah, good question. So if you're starting in equity research, it's a pretty good skill set to develop, because you're in the valuation space. You're looking at like you're touching the markets, but you're also like having to do some fundamental research. So yeah, hedge funds, asset management would be a natural transition as well, where you're maybe working for a long only fund, or you're a hedge fund. Absolutely. You know, maybe a hedge fund with a specific, like if you're doing equity research for like the tech space, maybe you'd go to a hedge fund that focuses in tech, or a PE fund. PE a little bit less frequent, simply because you know, there's a little bit more around the skills around M&A and you know, like sponsor, like if you're an IB, sponsors or an IB M&A, those skill sets tend to translate a little bit better, because you're still getting the valuation experience in that. Whereas equity research, it's a little bit more kind of a little bit more narrow in your skill set that you develop, being much more around like, you know, obviously writing the reports and helping support kind of the model building around that. But I think it's a great place to start. Not a ton of seats though, so it's not easy to get into. Here's a good question from YouTube. Sayvuk, sorry if I'm slaughtering your name. A thought on private credit as a buy-side exit in terms of total comp hours, actual work. There's a lot of the mega funds have private credit arms and private credit dedicated So I think it could be a great buy side exit. I think if you look at the hours to comp ratio and actual, I think it's very favorable. I think you can get paid really well, and the hour, especially for the hours, and the hours tend to be a little bit less insane. The actual work, I don't think it's quite as interesting, but I'm a little biased. I was in private equity, not private credit, so I think it still can be very interesting work, but it's just a little bit more like you're looking at obviously downside cases, making sure that your credit's protected, and then just trying to get as high a return as possible for these credits. And it's kind of an interesting time in terms of private credit, with obviously rates having accelerated so fast. So fast in such a short amount of time. It's kind of insane time. But yeah, let me see what else we got here. I think in terms of like work-life balance, if you want good pay as a buy-side exit, I think it's a great potential option if it interests you. Manavas is currently in the final year of his undergrad in BSc Finance. I have a Big Four job lined up due to there being no IB jobs available in India before my MBA. What do you suggest my roadmap be to get into IB? I think in India it's much more common, I believe, it requires the MBA to get that. So yeah, I mean, Big Four is a great place to start you get training, you get a good name on your resume. So I think it's a great place to be. If you can get into transaction advisory services within the Big Four, that's what I always say is a great place. You want to just basically try and get as much financial modeling Excel work as you can at the Big Four in order to be able to speak to those in the IB interviews. And then roadmap to get to IB, that could be once you get into TAS. If it's really strict on the MBA requirement, then you'd have to go get an MBA. And if you come to the US for that, there is a little bit of a lottery in terms of like being able to get the visa and stuff. So definitely look into that, because it's not a guaranteed thing where the bank would bring you on, especially in a recession right now. So you may want to actually work a few years. It might be good to hide out at the Big Four for a few years, try to kind of do an internal transition to TAS, to transaction advisory services, because that's going to start building up that resume and the skill set that you need to kind of translate it to IB better. So I'd work on that first before kind of jumping straight into an MBA, just because you can always do the MBA after a few years of work. And I think it's a better use of the time, because you can use it as a reset once you know a little bit more and you're a little bit wiser and older. Hey, Wesley, good question. Does the Wall Street Oasis private equity course have case studies that help you think like an investor, or is it just the LBO courses? Yeah. So we have a separate LBO modeling course, which is much more around like the details of, the very nuanced details of like tax accounting, purchase accounting, doing roll-up strategies and like how to model those properly. So very nuanced, super in-depth LBO modeling course. The private equity interview course, so there's different ones. So there's a private equity interview course, which is going to be much more focused around making sure that, number one, you know how to speak to your investment banking deals in the context of a private equity interview. So we have like audio of actual people walking through their deals that landed in private equity and how they did it. And we also have a ton of actual LBO modeling tests that were run at specific funds from the year prior. So we're always kind of crowdsourcing from the community to get the latest tests in there so you can see them. And that includes cases as well. So yes, we have cases there to show you specifically like how you would structure a case. And then really exciting things coming out for all of our interview courses soon, is we're going to have a new module within all of them that leverages the crowdsourced company database interview insights. So we've collected, I think, like 40,000 interview questions and answers from the community over the years. We are going to be launching a flashcard module within all the interview courses in the LMS, in our learning management system, that basically allows the user to filter the flashcards so that they can just drill quickly and see a ton of questions. So for example, if you were like, hey, I want to see any single possible question on IRR in private equity, you could just toggle that and then quickly just drill through like several hundred questions and see like the most common. And you'd also be able to like drill by like, hey, okay, I have an interview with KKR. You could just go to KKR and just look through those as well. So we're going to have some pretty awesome capabilities coming to all the interview courses probably in the next week or two. So I'm super excited about that. But yeah, it does have cases. It has it's very much like diving into what specific things you need to hit on to talk about like what makes a good deal, what doesn't make a good deal, and what should be covered in a deck that you put together for a case. So yeah. Here we go. Let's see what else we got. I missed some other ones, so I'm scrolling back up. Hey, it's kind of thanks so much for the response. Would you say it's doable to go from IB to private wealth management and AM for like the relationship based in sales work? Absolutely, Connor. I think it's a little bit easier to make that move. Although what I'll say is when you jump into PWM or AM, if you're doing the private wealth management in particular, you're kind of starting from ground zero. It's one of these businesses that like you'll probably have to get a CFP, certified financial planner, maybe a CFA to like build up your credibility in the space. And you're really starting from ground zero. So you're expected to build your own book oftentimes. And it can be one of those things where if you're not good at it, it can be really low paying for a long time. But if you are good at it, it's one of those things that over the years, as your book builds and you start getting a lot more referrals, by the time you're 40 or 50, you can have a very cushy job bringing in really good money, being, 500,000 plus easy. But like, that's from putting in the work of like 15 years consistently of like sourcing and calling and sales. And if you do that, like you'd be surprised how much it can start steamrolling in the later years. And so then it becomes a really, really nice career. If you love the markets, if you love talking to people, if you love kind of talking people off a ledge when the markets are tanking. Let's see what else we got here. Amir, am I missing any? Yeah, there's someone asked about remote jobs. Palumi here. Yeah, so are there remote options for IB roles? Yes, there are, but they're pretty rare. Usually there's at least some hybrid requirement to be in the office. Although there's a little bit of movement away from that. Like there's some firms that are a little bit more open-minded. But yeah, I think it's pretty rare. Usually there's at least some requirement to be in the office for IB specifically. So we saw such like a big push for people to come back. But I know some places are still allowing like for some hybrid, especially for like the middle ranks and stuff. I think for analysts, it's really tough. I think the expectation is more that you're going to show your face. Let's see, here we go. Rashab is asking me, would love an opinion on middle market private equity versus middle market investment banking versus investor relations mega fund private equity out of undergrad. Interesting. An opinion. Okay. So I think the middle market IB is going to be probably the worst work-life balance, probably slightly better pay than the middle market private equity and the IR with when you include bonus. It's probably going to develop your skill set a little bit better. Middle market private equity, it's going to be a little bit more limiting, but maybe more interesting work. If you're coming in as an analyst, you're going to get exposure to like doing deals straight to the buy side. You get to avoid maybe working the 100-hour weeks and doing that. So like, I would probably lead towards the middle market private equity job on undergrad, assuming they have a good track record and assuming that the funds are growing, each subsequent fund is growing and it's a good place. You just have to be careful with private equity because as unstable as investment banking is, private equity funds too, like if they have a couple bad investments, you can be out on the street pretty fast. And then you're kind of left with a little bit more of a niche skill set with private equity in terms of like, did you really ever get that financial modeling training? I think we're starting to train more at private equity funds lately. They're getting they're of the opinion now that I think they realize people coming out of banking still need some training on deal process. So we've actually been closing a lot more business there in terms of helping them get those IB analysts up to speed to become a pre-MBA PE associate. But if you're coming in as a PE analyst, you really you might not necessarily have that formal training, especially at a middle market private equity fund. So while I love the work, and I think the work's much more interesting, middle market PE, you have to just make sure you're at a place that's supportive of those juniors, and you got to be careful you're not going to places like maybe the analyst program is brand new. They think they can run it, but then they don't have the supports in place to make sure you're doing okay or you're thriving. Because like, do they have training programs? Do they have, is there somebody that's going to be mentoring you and making sure you're okay? Because as an analyst right out of undergrad, it's hard to know what you're doing in any new career. And then IR, completely different. Mega fund private equity, pretty cool job actually. But I don't know as much about the IR space. My sense is the work-life balance would be best there, in the sense of like, my guess of the hours wouldn't be as intense. Although at a mega fund PE firm, maybe the expectations are still super high for the IR team, probably, I'm guessing. So it's just, you're going to be developing less kind of technical investing roles, which to me, I think closes more doors. I think it's easier to go from an investing role to an IR role than vice versa. So I think it's closing more doors going to a mega fund PE. So like I always say, develop the skill set you want to do, don't try to just go for the name brand. So just because it's a mega fund PE, if it's IR role, I'd much rather go to a direct investing role in a middle market private equity fund, assuming it's not like going to be going under or whatever. Yeah, no worries, Rishabh. Hope that's helpful. I was going through my connections and found a bunch of people with, okay, here we go. So I don't know who said this. I think, Amir, you might have pasted this in from somebody. I was going through my connections on LinkedIn. I found a bunch of people with incoming blank summer analyst in their profile. Made me think about the people in IB. I get it's a high stress, low work-life balance industry, but are people actually somewhat normal, or is it just the obsessed worker drone type? Would you want to be friends with those in IB? If not, why? To be fair to the kids who put incoming XYZ analysts at a certain place, oftentimes the firm wants you to do that because it helps promote them, that type of stuff. So I wouldn't be like thinking that just because there's someone's putting that, they're an obsessed worker drone type. Yes, the work-life balance tends to be very tough in IB. But the people are actually some of the most interesting and intelligent people that I ever met. So like my analyst class was filled with a bunch of really cool people. So yeah, I don't think you of course get some bad eggs in every batch, but like a lot of them were great people. Some people I still, I could call up today and they'd be helpful. So yeah, I'd like to be friends with a lot of people in IB. I don't think it's all just obsessed worker drone types. It just tends to be people who are really motivated, which I actually like those people. So that's just personal preference, but they have that dog in exactly. They have that dog in them, as DJ says. Let's see. This is kind of a moving to NYC after graduation. I'm trying to figure out how to get an apartment for rent. Oh, good luck. New York City rent is a nightmare. Do real estate agents respond to people trying to do virtual showings and then e-signings? I seem to not be getting any responses. Yeah, it's tough. Most people go out to try and lock down an apartment. I think it's pretty tough. And it's hard to do it more than like a month in advance, but this was like 20 years ago. I don't know. Maybe someone in the comments can give more advice on like New York rental real estate and what it's like now. But for when I was there, it was insane. You had to wait like 3 weeks to 4 weeks prior, and then you had to like just jump on when you got. And then there was always the broker fee. So you could always look for no fee listings and stuff like this. But and sometimes you can avoid or negotiate the fees down from like something obscene to like 1 month or something. Is it still possible to break into IB as a college grad? Hey, Daniel. Yes, It's absolutely possible to break into IB as a college grad. In fact, that's where most people start in IB, is right out of college. Here we go. Last summer, I was an IB intern at a top boutique. And by the way, I got about 5 minutes, guys, before I got to hop, but we'll try to get a few more in. Last summer, I was IB intern at a top boutique, one of these, Centerview, UK. For sure. I enjoyed the internship, and there are solid exit options from this firm, but I think I want to try for a bulge bracket. It's difficult because I don't know if I want to give up a job at one of the top banks on the street. Obviously, within the world of finance, these banks are well respected, but I feel like I want to pursue another field in finance. The BB might have better name recognition. Please advise. Ooh. I think it's going to be pretty tough to turn down one of those elite boutiques. I think you might look back and regret turning that down. Did you not like the internship? Was it too intense for you? Or do you feel like, I just feel like the work you do is going to matter so much more. I mean, I'm rereading your question again. Difficult because I don't know if I want to give up a job at one of the top banks on the street. Obviously, within the world of finance, these banks are well respected, but I feel like I want to pursue another field in finance. So you're thinking the bulge bracket name may help you make a transition in finance. I kind of disagree with that. I think anybody who knows anything around investment bank, if you're going to be doing investment banking, I think being at one of the elite boutiques is sometimes better, not just in terms of pay. It can be higher pay, but it can also just be great deal flow and great experience. So I'd say Centerview and Evercore more than Solomon. PJT strong. Like, these are all very strong banks. So like, yeah, I think if you can get into like a top group at a bulge bracket, then maybe, but I think otherwise you're kind of playing with fire. I think I'd just be dancing in the streets and enjoy your time in college, whatever you have left before you hit the desk, because it's going to get really, really intense. But yeah, I would I'd be very happy with an offer from any of those. So on an enjoyment and career trajectory perspective, I still think, suffering, even if it's for 1 year at one of those elite boutiques, you can always get out after a year if you really, really despise it and you can't survive for that second year. I did 2 years and it was really brutal. I knew I couldn't go longer after the second year. But for some, I think it sets you up so well that it's kind of hard not to do it. And I know you'll probably be cursing me when you're working at like 3 a.m. for like the 10th night in a row on a live deal. You'll probably be cursing me and be like, why did he tell me to do this? I hate my life, existential crisis at 22 years old. But when you come out at the other end and when you see what you can get paid and the trajectory of your career coming out of those banks, I think you're going to be realized looking back 5-10 years later, like, okay, that sacrifice that I made early on was worth it. Especially when you start a family, just financial security, all that good stuff. Let's see here. We have somebody, Jeffrey, I'm not going to post your full name here just for keep it anonymous, but like, you interned out of products at a bulge bracket, want to switch for full-time. Could I still do on cycle switch to coverage? Yeah, you could, but like, again, it's kind of risky, right? Like, it depends if you already have the offer. I think you want to be doing that during the internship. You want to be networking with whatever groups and whatever parts of the firm. You don't necessarily want to be like taking an offer and then trying to like renege on it or switch it up. It's just, I know it's frustrating if you're not going to where you want to go exactly, but it's also like, especially in this market, it's super risky to be just playing with fire in terms of like, oh, I didn't get exactly what I wanted. Or I want that bulge bracket name brand rather than an elite boutique. Like, I think you guys are playing with fire. I honestly, if it was like a booming market where if you were talking to me in 2021, I'd say, yeah, do whatever you want, because there was so much demand for like any sort of junior talent. I think you could have gotten away with a lot of that, more of that stuff. But right now I'd say it's probably better just to like take the offer, the full-time offer. Yeah, if you're networking, Jeffrey, like for sure. I mean, I think if you can do it, that's great. Got it. Asset-based lending. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be tough to make that transition because their seats are full, but you should definitely go for it. I would just be careful that it's not like it's done kind of subtly and respectfully and all that stuff, so that it doesn't kind of trickle back and people are like, why is this kid so gung ho on like leaving this good job? So just be careful with that. All right, everybody. I think I'm going to call it. It's been 40 minutes, but I'll do a full hour. I'll try to do a full hour next week, but I got another call coming up. So let's touch base again soon. Thanks everybody for joining. And then, yeah, in a couple weeks, stay tuned because we have some big announcements coming. I think some of you will be interested in hearing about. Bye, everybody. Thank you.